And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Rebecca Renfroe-Borneman, former music and theater professional who's worked both on and off Broadway. She's also a Christian woman who happens to be an ET contactee that has had both waking contact as well as being aboard crafts since childhood. Rebecca, thanks for joining me and welcome.
Thank you. It's wonderful. It's a beautiful day here in Florida, and you're in Texas, right?
Yes.
All right. Thanks for this opportunity to be on your show and to tell my story. I'm just but one voice in millions, and I don't know or have all the answers. Just my experience, the data, the percentage of all my waking hours, and my observations. And that's what I'm really looking forward to sharing to your listeners.
Well, I think my audience should listen very closely today because we're going to have an amazing show. And on that note, Rebecca, let's start with how did this ET contact all start for you?
When I was a child, I grew up in a wonderful household with great parents, grandparents, lots of cousins that I love and I'm still in touch with today. So I had a wonderful surrounding already to begin with. My parents were open and acknowledged any abilities or gifts that you would have, whether they were natural ones such as singing or dancing, and anything that had to do with dreams or visions or knowings, they also paid attention to that. Strong Christians, so everything was an open door, except what we did not practice were reading of cards or anything that was outside of a Christian base. However, they were very open, a lot more so than what most theological backgrounds would not allow you to go. We did. You were welcome to read and to practice. But in terms of practicing anything outside, and I'm not condemning someone who does spiritualism work, we did not practice Ouija boards in the home. In fact, when I was given one, I was told to give it away very, very quickly because it opened up portals, things of that nature. We did not do tarot cards. So as I said, I am not condemning someone of that nature. I'm saying these are the certain things. We had parameters in the home, but we allowed for a number of things and places and books and experiences. It was not ignored. We just didn't practice certain things that we felt would not be conducive for safety. And that's the environment I grew up in. So by age 7, I began experiencing in the back of the house, at the front door with my mother, and at my grandfather's home in Georgia. There were 3 places of contact. They were at home and also up in Georgia. And that was with the ETs, going aboard the crafts, being with different species, and experiencing things since I was 7.
Can you tell us about the very first time you saw an ET? What did it look like? And what happened?
The longest span from childhood was like 7 to 12 or 13. And my contact was from what I referred to as the tall golden. We're talking anywhere, they could range from 6 to 10, 8 to 10 feet tall. Beautiful, like baby skin, and the strongest similarity would be a tall gray, but these were beautiful golden, kind, open, 4-fingered, and that's what I remember. I'm talking about that within the backyard when I would be what I call in dimension, where there were military there were spacecraft. You would work on all different kinds of training to see what you were qualified to do. That's what I'm assuming after all these years. And at the front door, it was different. On different nights, I would get up, go to the door. My mother would leave her bedroom and greet me at the door. And there would be 4 to 5 figures. And the only thing that I remembered up until I was acknowledging this with my mother before she passed and explain more, then it was easy for me to remember even more, because all I had in my memory was being at the front door, and there were shadow figures. To her, in her Georgia accent, Jeff, you have a strong Texan accent out there for some of your friends, and in Georgia, North Carolina, and Alabama, they talk like this, and Mama would say, they were as ugly as hell. So for her, and she was stationed at the door, she was imprinted with like a magnetic pull to where she could not leave or go with me. She'd stay at the door till they brought me home. And they were different heights, and they were shadow figures to me. And Mother, I guess, could see them perhaps in their form and different varieties. And they would take me in a craft that would go up, straight up very quickly, and then shoot off at a straight diagonal.
Where in Georgia were you living?
That was I've actually never given the location before. I just say Georgia. It was at my grandfather's home.
Was it somewhere rural?
Well, where he lived was actually because he had a great deal of land. He was a wealthy banker.
All right.
And he had a great deal of land in the back of his home. So I would go out, and it would be like the name of my book, Quantum Windows. I would go through a quantum window. It was a different kind of experience where I would be taken by three small, which if you would refer to them as grays, and I would go into the quantum window. They'd pull me through. It was just as easy as if you climb out of your own window to step into the yard. And then I would play with them, and it was a give and take. I'd learn from them. They'd learn from me. It was a beautiful setting. And the energy, when we walk into a garden, now I want you to picture an English garden, and it was energetic. The energy rose up from each color, from every flower, from the ground, from the surroundings. Everything moved like water. It was absolutely wonderful to be there. And that's where I would go into and play. And I do have that in the best description and drawing that my husband helped me with in the book to show that. And I think I described what it was like in the back. But as I said, as far back as 7 is when I truly believe it began. But there was a lot of activity that at this point in my life does come back in terms of my room. And but that's a whole story unto itself that I don't even write about.
Would you say that these beings would be the color of giraffes when you say the golden color?
No, it was more like the color of gold and sunshine combined, the skin of a baby.
Was their head normally shaped, or was it uniquely shaped?
It was large. That's why I said the closest thing would be the grays, the tallest gray you can think of, that kind of shape where it's elongated.
Because I have a video that I'm going to post tonight, and in this video, the guest talks about meeting with a yellow alien, which is the first time that I've ever heard of that. And he said the head was kind of like almost like a banana-like, like an appendage-like. But he described the color being kind of like giraffe skin color. So I was curious if this was the same alien.
Well, I don't know. I'll have to see the video you're showing and what this particular drawing is. That's interesting.
Does that sound similar to yours in any way?
Not like a giraffe, but I can see.
Maybe
because they have long, the long arms, the same shape as a body. It's very different and cylindrical. And
were they about 8 or 9 feet tall?
Yes. Yeah. I said cylindrical. That's not what I meant. I have to choose so that I can describe it better.
Right. Well, I don't know how
I have so many drawings in the book.
Do you have a drawing of one in the book right next to you that you can hold it up and show it to us?
That sounds like a good idea. Yes. Okay, here we go.
I think his was kind of slimmer, although the head kind of went further back, more, even extended back further.
Interesting.
Yeah. Do you think that these ETs had contact with your mother far back, even before you were born?
If they did, that's not what she talked to me about. She just acknowledged that she had been with me and that they came to the door and she would wait and then put me to bed. And as I told you, what she said about them. And then when we recorded it before she passed, also that they were from outer space. And when she had a sighting coming away and off of our house that I grew up in, the second one that we lived in here, she was with a naval officer's wife, and they both saw it at the same time, and they could see the figures inside, and then it disappeared. And she was so angry, and I write about this in the book. Mama was so angry, she got on the phone and kept calling MacDill Air Force Base every day for a week until I got on the phone when my family asked me to call someone to talk to Mother because they were afraid someone would come to the house. So I did. And I called Stanton Friedman, and he got on with my mother and just gently talked to her because she was angry that the military were not doing their job in instructing and training and bringing the education to the public. And that's where I am now. So she was there in her older years. So it very well could be. That's such a good question. I don't think anyone's asked me about that before, but no, she did not. But my father, also when I was young, took me to see the reptilians. And I do have one of those. I did briefly describe that in the book. And then he said later on that I would remember everything, but it wasn't their focus. Their focus was to bring me up and encourage all of us girls and my brother before he passed to do what you're supposed to do and pray and, be a good citizen and practice your Christianity and your faith the best that you could, care about others, and to find your purpose in life and to accomplish it the best way that you can, even in the midst of your mistakes.
Did they ever tell you how they chose you and your family?
Another good question. No, they did not. And out of the conversations that I had and have had over the years, that has not truly been explained or laid out to me in a sufficient way. And I think that that's an honest question to ask and a good one. But no, they have not. And I will, you know what? I will, when next time I am aboard, which has not been recently, I will ask that.
How often are you in contact with them?
Oh, I can go out now and look up, and I can, if I get quiet physically, mentally, and spiritually, I say, hello, where are you this evening? And they will show themselves, either break the camouflage, or they'll show as movement, what looks like dots, or they will say, go out at 8:30, look up to the north, south, or the northeast. We're going to move in and out of a portal. Here we are, please come outside, and we'll say hello. It's usually that fast because it's not easy for them to come in and out of our space, our spatial existence here in the 3D, because the technology exists to take them down, and there are others who have ability in other programs that can step outside and make contact very easily. It's not that hard when you have acclimated yourself to it, or you've been doing it all your life, but it seems to be easier now than ever before.
Would you say that most of the time they're in another dimension, and then sometimes they'll come through a portal and they'll be in our dimension, and they're usually, as you said, camouflaged?
That's excellent. And I think the scientists and physicists and researchers, and even in the UFO community itself, Jacques Vallée, I think, has a very good description about how he sees it, and everyone has their own take on it. To me, it's best, since I'm not a scientist or a physicist, I can say dimensions and layers. I think the way they phrase it scientifically is excellent. I see it as the layers of a cake or the layers of a building. You go up and down your floors. You get out when you stop. You're in the same building, but you're on a different floor. If I can describe the whole universe that way, it's kind of, that's the way I can do it in a nutshell for a child. In terms of, for me, and I'm talking to a mom who's had an experience, I say, well, you bake a cake, don't you? I say, well, think of it as the layers of a cake. And you start with whipping it up with all your ingredients, and then you do everything that you need to do and put everything in, and then you bake it. Well, within that beautiful cake, it's layers. You can have chocolate in there, and then you can also layer the outside. It is one cake, but it has different ingredients. In terms of, we are in a 3D, so everything is materialistic. And we exist in that. And many people don't get past that dimensional existence. That's where the consciousness comes in. I think Edgar Mitchell said it best before he formed the Noetics. And then Ray worked with him, and then now it's into a different step. But when he got that started, his quote, I'm paraphrasing it, was looking out of his window and saying, oh my, we're all connected. And that one consciousness is the is the thread, so to speak. That's the word I'm using. Everyone else, we use their terminology. I think it's a combination of all of it. In one of the movies of Indiana Jones, at the end of one of the movies, they, as the spacecraft is zooming away, they'll go space within space. So it's very much like the terminology that we all use is based on how and where we were brought up and what we learn and how we read, and then what we finally accept. In the terminology that we use with one another, excuse me, when you're talking to a Christian group, it is best to use, and which I do because I believe in the Holy Spirit. But if I stay with consciousness, a lot of people have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about. And it's difficult to talk about that. Three-dimensional, they'll be able to ascertain, but we have to, it's like a language. Use the best language you can with the group you're speaking with to reach them and where they are, not changing what you think, but changing how you speak. If I'm speaking to my Spanish friends and I'll say, hola, ¿cómo está? And then you speak in the language so they can hear you. If you're signing with your friend, use the sign to the best that you can. And don't try to talk in another language because they don't understand that. So in terminology, we have to do the same. Science is going to use science, and we have to then break everything down. I don't separate science from my faith because that doesn't make sense to me. God, our creator, however you see God, created everything. And however you believe it came into being, it has substance and it has consciousness and it has movement. And however you describe it, it exists. And I can't separate, and I would never in my own walk and sharing separate that, because if God created everything, he created the science. So I better get with it and acknowledge everything instead of standing back and saying, well, you don't exist. And, or so I'm not going to throw anything out. I'm going to at least look at it.
What are the ET's agenda here?
That's a difficult one to answer. And I think most of us in the UFO community and the Christian community who have had experiences now know that there are different agendas. Those who have been dealing with this in military and other secret programs, they've known all along that there are different agendas. We have good and bad people, We have evil and good, yin and yang, light and dark. But the darkness, the void is not completely bad because we are encased in the void in the womb, and that's very comforting. But there are some grayish areas, and in this area of agenda, it exists. And that's going to be one of the hardest parts of disclosure and can be misunderstood because abductions in that agenda, if you believe that something is a felony, as we do, abducting someone against their will, that is a felony, and you can be prosecuted for that. If you believe in the agenda of the grays or the people or whoever abducts you, that it's okay, that they can take your baby or they can take your DNA or they can do all these experiments and you're okay with that, then you're okay. If you believe that something has caused trauma in your life, then I always encourage people to seek help and guidance with that. I do not disregard that. I do not say they're wrong in their thinking, but we need to help one another go through what these different agendas are. And some are beneficial and some are not beneficial. I don't think every person who's abducted is abducted because that abduction was done for a bad reason. It could have been for their good. And therefore, if you know the story of Travis Walton, and I have met him and listened to him speak, he reviewed that and realized that his being taken up turned out for the good. They worked at healing what had harmed him. So in that case, it turned out to be good. And he tried his best to retell his story after what they had done from the Hollywood style. But those who are abducted in an agenda that hurts and harms them and leaves them frightened, that is not a good thing. And other agendas where they manipulate and create a hybridization that is harmful for what they have created, that is not a good agenda. And that I have seen in a small way and should be exposed. They have cannibalism. We don't consider that a good thing, and it isn't. If you have a universal law of right and wrong, or you have a law here that you abide by, or you have a 10 Commandment law, or you have a Christian law, or whatever law that you exist with, then you're going to have good and bad, and what you're going to consider that is against our law. So that is a difficult one because the agendas vary.
Well, what is your purpose here?
Oh. I believe my purpose is to share the love that I have experienced in this person that I know as my Redeemer, Jesus Christ. That's first and foremost. And that love is first and will always be first. I hope that my purpose will always be the ability to forgive myself and all others around me. To have that much love is a really great thing to ask for. My purpose now is I believe, and has always been, is to be here to pray for the planet as a whole. And I've had to come to understand that. The other purpose is to grassroots. I work on the grassroots level to educate and inform people that we're not alone in the universe, just on my own local level, and also with panels, and get engaged in local people who will listen, whether they're in government or not, just on a small, minuscule level. And my book is to educate to the best that I can with what I have said and what I can say in my life story, and to talk, like on these interviews, to the best that I can.
Well, what is the most exciting UFO experience that you've had?
That would have been 1997 up in Maine. 1997 in Maine, 3 months at a summer camp. And prior to it, 4 months prior to even going there, I had dreams and visions of a place, and I had to go find it on the internet. And when I found it, I applied, and they said, "Oh, but we don't have a theatrical opening. You wouldn't want to come." I said, "Yeah, I don't care what you give me. I'll work. I'll sweep. I didn't say I'm not supposed to be there because I kept having these dreams and visions. I even dreamed of one of the counselors, this very handsome young man I kept seeing in the dream. I had no idea who he was or what he was going to mean. And later, it was his wife that I was to pray for. I didn't know any of that yet. I just had to find the place and get myself up there. So they put me in charge in the kitchen of young people from around the world who worked with me, and we cleaned. And then I would, if somebody wanted a lesson on guitar, I'd give a lesson, and then I would sing occasionally. And it was that experience that was so beautiful. I was prepped 2 nights in a gel, and they downloaded the DNA and created my own craft, organic as well as whatever materials they use. Now that I don't know. I'm sure scientists in secret programs have use of that. And I'm not even privy to that. I don't really care. It was just wonderful to have it in the DNA. And I do describe that and lay out the schematic pattern and the whole theory of how it was constructed in the book. And it was beautiful. I traveled from there through the cosmos to a planet and then taken down. And it was a beautiful, wonderful, exciting experience. And the best I can do is to send you to the movie Contact. And when she travels, that is the closest. I'm not saying it was exactly like that, but that's the closest. It is that beautiful, and it is real, and it happened.
Can you briefly share with us what the craft looked like?
Circular. It had a schematic layout design of 7 different sections of triangles. There was a B-flat tone coming out of one section. The DNA ran in the upper half. There were laser beams that kept it with intact, so to speak. The outside perimeter is where I walked. Very familiar to me because you walked above the actual formation of the craft. If you want to say metallic, there's a magnetic structure, and you walk above it, a couple of inches above. And then I had a chair that came out prepared for me, and there were silver cups that came around the wrists, and which I'm sure were navigational as well as monitoring of me. I had been prepped, as I said, for 2 nights prior, and they dressed me and took me up in a light form into the craft. Sorry, I'm going backwards to it. And I was in a type of linen material, a top and a bottom, very comfortable, white, cream white color. And then I sat in the chair, and then a section of the front opened up so I could see just like in a car. And it was the craft designed for me with my DNA. So they are organic. They are living.
Wow.
Not all of them are, but this one was.
Did you travel through a portal or a wormhole like she did in the movie?
To me, from where I was in my chair, which I'm sure has consciousness connected with it as well. But the main connection of outside of me, because I did not see any other species or ET or human, but me aboard that craft. To my right, the information, was sitting in the chair. Everything was given and talked to me until we started. Then the window would open. And as I traveled, it was like being in a car. I could not see any kind of portal or stargate. It was just the universe itself. It was all the nebulae, the planets. It was stunning. What I thought was of interest, which was so exciting, so I'm going to go back and let me put this in order, sequential order for you, because I got excited, which I do quite often. So let me start. The prep came first in the gel. for 2 nights. And I believe they were able to take the mitochondria of the cell, which is the energy, and transfer that through their tapping in the gel, transfer that into a computer or however they did that. Now that I'm not aware of, and design the craft accordingly. Why they had 7 sections, it interests me because my name is 777. Rebecca Langdon Renfroe, 777. So maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. There's another part I don't know. So when they transferred me from where I was into the craft, it was on a table. It was very comfortable, and I was in the linen clothing, and I went up into the light form and into the craft. And when I stood there, I walked, first of all, straight ahead of me I was surrounded with the laser sections, but I could see the DNA running through the center part of the craft. And I stuck my arm in it, and it broke apart. All the atoms broke apart, and it was warm. And I pulled it back, and then my arm came back into its complete form. So I thought, I better not go through that section. I'll back up and go on the familiar walkway because I've been aboard the craft, so I should go along the outside perimeter. Since I knew to walk, you learn how to walk above this energy section. I'm not saying it's scientifically correct. Magnetic pull, you're walking a couple of inches above the floor, so to speak. It's like being aboard a tightrope walker who is trained and has on the right shoes and can walk the tightrope. It's like that. That's the best description. So that's, and years later, so maybe this will be helpful to the listener as well, because I like to point out movies. Years later, I came across the movie, The Last Mimsy, and there is a scientist on there called Dr. Brian Greene. He's in that film. In that film, it shows a child reaching into a type of form that's created with stones. And it's 2 children that come across a very special box. You need to see the film if you haven't. But in it, you'll see the arm is, I'm just going to atomized. That's the best way to put it. And then she pulls it back out and it takes its form. That's what it was like.
What was your destination and what did it look like?
I do show the reader that in my book. When we reached a certain nebulae, we stopped. And the nebulae had intelligence. And it said, go down to the planet. Here again, I'm going to refer your listener, because years later, when I watched the movie Contact, when she is pictured going down to the planet, she's kind of like this. She's got her headset on and she's like, that is so, so good. So she goes down to the planet. So that's the best way if you want to see something visual. I'm on a planet that has Adobe-like settings. Things are broken up. It's extremely hot. And I go around one of the Adobe walls, and there's a spacesuit on the ground. And then everything ended. And for years, I never knew the rest of that. So now, like, what was it? Who was the reporter who always said, and now the rest of the story? Some of your listeners will remember who that was on television.
I think it was Paul Harvey or something like that.
Paul Harvey. You're right. Here we go. Now the rest of the story. So years later, I actually had a wonderful quiet meditation session with a space scientist. And he had me speak a great deal at the Edgar Cayce Foundation up there in Virginia Beach. And he had a license, and he took me through a meditation state. And those memories of the rest of what happened on that planet started to return. And I acknowledged that. And so since I didn't ask him if I could mention him, just know he is still working with the the near-death experiencers at Virginia Beach and all of those wonderful people up there. And I acknowledge his great work. But no, I do acknowledge him in the book. Excuse me. Neil Helm. I acknowledge him and what he has done for my life, as many others. And he took me through a session, and a lot of the memories came back. So now I'll finish the rest of that story. I did put on that suit that was there, and two others came by in other kinds of suits that were accessible to fly. And they took me into a circular pipe. I don't have a better description of it. They took me into a circular, and within that circular pipe, when I went up into that, there existed different time sections in the time zone. I'm talking about things now that I am not really capable of expressing correctly. And if I had a scientist here or a researcher, they would do a far better job at this than I can. And that's where they took me. Then it began to make sense of the different locations in my life, that the backyard growing up had to do with going into dimension, learning how to do specific things, manipulating the air, experiencing certain things, and watching the training of those in the crafts and the military and the ETs there. The front with my mother had to do with time. And this particular thing, going down to the planet and experiencing this, somehow we can go in different time zones. I do not know how that is possible. I just know it does exist. Others may say I'm just dreaming and all of this is just a dream. That's absolutely fine. That's okay. I'm interested in the research and the data of it. That interests me, and how it's described scientifically. But that's the best way and the most that I remember. May I also at this time, I know you're gonna ask me a lot of things since I acknowledge Neil. The reason why I'm speaking, you would ask me about my purpose. And I think, Jeff, I can illuminate that even more. My purpose also was to write my life story. And why did I do it? Why? Is because I was encouraged by Kathleen Marden, Stanton Friedman. She was co-editor. Kathleen Marden was, and many people in research know who she is. And the Colonel Phil Bailey, who did the foreword of my book, all of them encouraged me to write from a Christian standpoint, because most of the theology taught is that they are all demons. So, and a sentient being, in my estimation and observation, also my purpose is, I believe, is to say that from my observation, I don't know it all. Run from anybody who tells you they do know it all, because we don't know it all. But our observations and our experiences show us what we can only say and share. And that is, like the layers of the cake I described, you have God's realm, you have a created realm of angelic, you have a created realm of ETs and some that evolve, and you have mankind. Many people believe we came from an alien heritage, and that's okay. But in the long run, who's the source? That's where I always go back to. So I think my purpose is to try to help bridge that gap, that there's a difference, that there is a dark demonic force, but there's also an angelic force. You can make a decision as a sentient being, and I believe that they are sentient beings. Some are robotic in nature, but all the ETs I know can say, what do you believe? Can I believe that too? What and why? So I don't believe that I believe that they do have a soul. But we have something that a lot of ETs do not have in the consciousness and the soul area, which I believe they seek, which could be also another part of the agenda. So my husband was also a reason for writing. And I believe that at this point in my life, because I'm 73 years old, so I started this 12 years ago, but didn't finally get it out till 24. So I believe it's also because my Heavenly Father, God and Jesus were saying, it's time now, don't be afraid, and gave me a scripture verse in Joshua, I'm going to be with you. So I trust that, and I do the best I can in my small little way. And that to show that the purpose also is if we have something happen, look at the patterns of your life, keep a journal, look at it, write them down, start connecting the dots. If you're a reporter, connect the dots. Who's great at that? Carrie Cassidy's great at that. She connects the dots. We've got so many great people out there talking and speaking. Look at you. So we can't put God in a box anymore. Theology often does that. There's nothing wrong with theology and theological background. But if we stay there, we can't allow the consciousness or our gifts to develop. We get stuck. We can't be good disciples either. We can't heal. We can't practice our faith and use our gifts. And I also have learned, in my opinion now, my opinion, that there's a difference between what the ETs give you and teach you versus what we have in the Christian realm. The gifts of the Spirit are clearly delineated. Your healing, your gifts of discernment, and all of that. In the ET realm, they will teach you how to jump off and how to use the air, or they'll work your intuitive skills, such as, in flying that craft. Sure, all that had to be developed. So I see it, and I'll say that my other note about what it's given me in my life. I'll save that to leave with the listeners at the end of our talk.
I believe that some of the skeptics out there would say that anything that has to do with ETs would be contradictory to what is taught in Christianity. That they're at odds with each other. How would you answer that?
One of the things in research, if you look closely at the work of Joseph Blumrich, if I'm probably not saying his name correctly, Blumrich, who worked for NASA. And I don't have all those particular notes right in front of me. You can look him up, Joseph. And he designed the lunar landing module. And he was challenged to go and read Ezekiel's vision. And that's how he saw the parts. So I think if we start even with our biblical structure, you will find that you have a lot of questions. It doesn't mean the Bible is not inspired. It doesn't mean that the Word of God is not there. See, I don't have a problem with this. But I understand those who do. So it's okay. But I really think that we need to be engaged in conversation even deeper, a lot deeper, and take a look at it. I like to listen to Freddie Silva and his discussion of the crop circles and all of his tapes, and he approaches everything from a totally different standpoint he'll teach you about the gods of Egypt and because I think that a lot of the gods are mistaken ETs that were considered gods because of their abilities, but that doesn't diminish that from the angelic, because I've been shown the difference. There's a totally different energy signature between an angelic and an ET. It's different. It's like when you're sitting in the Kirlian photography, your auric structure is going to be different than another person.
Is it possible that Jesus was an ET?
I have been asked that before, and I've listened to different discussions. I've read material where people believe that. But he is extra. First of all, he is extra. And okay, first of all, when a small group of Greys asked me once, why do you believe in Christ? And tell us the verses and so forth about his love and so forth. And so I just named some. And they said, oh, okay, we've downloaded that. We will think on that. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. When the ET passed into the quantum window in 2004, my friendly one, the friendly one, and it had given its life for mine. That's what I believe had happened in that. And I tell that at the top of my book. I use that as the first story. That told me that if Christ could go to an ET and show itself and make itself known, that was different to me. And if the ET said, Christ is there where I'm going, I know who he is, that told me at that time, without any shadow of a doubt for me, that he was different. Even after all of my life in 2004, that's still, I'm a grown up and I'm still growing in my faith. That told me a lot more than what I had known before. That there's something still different about this person of Christ. So that's what I'm going to say across the board. So what do I believe in Christ? And what could he be an ET? First of all, he's extra special, and an extra individual. If he's the fullness of God as described in our biblical text, the fullness of God is everything. So if he had to come down in the form of man, he becomes a 3D terrestrial individual of our territory, terrestrial here. Extra, yeah. But what was he or is he? Some believe, well, he was an ET form and he came down and he showed us how to use our powers. Okay. Others, I've read, the ETs formed him in the womb of Mary. Okay. Others, he did or did not die on that cross. Okay. Others, he did. How did he go up? Did he go up into a craft when he was ascending? What is ascension? What were they looking at? Did he go into the cloud? What kind of cloud? Clouds surround the ETs and their crafts sometimes. So, all right. With all of that, if people are in that realm and they believe that, here's where I am. There's something different about Christ. That fullness of the Godhead means that there's something there that's different. So if he died on the cross, if he did that, and I'm going to use the if as a way of using an open discussion here, instead of why should I shout at you and tell you you have to believe this or you're whatever. If he died on the cross and he was up there saying, I forgive you, I want that amount of love. I want that. I want to be able to say, if I ever have that, I want to be able to forgive that much. There's something different about that. I look at all the other religions, every single one of them have something wonderful, but dying on the cross with the redemption of sin, there's something different. What is sin? Separation from God. Okay, what does that mean? Everybody lives by a different universal truth. So what do we mean by that? One's truth is not going to be somebody else's. So, and what is hell? That's where I go back to this nugget. Jesus says, if you don't believe in me, and believe in the works, it's going to show you the Father. And then he says, and the Father's going to send you right back down and show you the Son. So if he is the Son of God, and he did go to the cross, and there is something about redemption, then I think I would rather look at that than just say he's another prophet or he's another this. If there's something different, if he brings light into the soul, and what is burning in hell? What is hell? For me, it's walking out of the light of Christ. If I step out of the light of Christ, I'm in a darkness, and that's hell to me. So therefore, I'm going to say there's something different. I look at it that way. Other people are going to shout at you and hit you over the head and say, if you don't believe in Jesus Christ, you're going to hell. Well, hell is going somewhere. And in that darkness, there's something else in his meanings and his teachings that we still don't have yet. We've put it into a theological setting that is so compact, like a boxing God in, like this. So we have within the Bible, from what I'm reading, from my interpretation, and from reading other sources, that we were never allowed to. I went ahead and read them anyway. So I went outside the books of the Bible and read the Apocrypha and read this and read that and read those, and even found a video of a traveler who was talking about the time of Jesus traveling between when he left the temple at 12 to 30 before he began his ministry. And someone found an actual scroll in a Tibetan monastery with Jesus's name on it, that he had traveled that far. That didn't seem possible to me. He began his ministry at 30 to 33. Why should I negate where he was, whether he grew up there or he traveled to gain? He's still different. So our theology has created a box. I read outside of that, but I don't take anything away. When I cross over and pass over, and I stood, and if I stood before something, an AI, some people believe we just came from an AI, some believe we didn't come from anything. Stay before, and they say, well, you got to go back. Reincarnation's real. You got to go back. And I'll go, oh boy, oh, I don't want to do that. Okay. And they say, Jesus was an ET. Okay. And I hear that and I go, oh boy. Well, I didn't lose anything. I didn't lose a thing following Christ. But since I do believe personally in this personal Savior, in this walk in Christ, in this following him, but we need to take a deeper look, a deeper dive into his teachings, into the books that cannot even fill the spaces to which are described. So was he an ET or not? He wasn't like the ETs I've met. There's something deeper and greater and more loving. But that ET gave his life for me, and he knows who Christ is, and he said he's there. So he didn't say he was an ET. He went through the quantum window, and that's my observation. I'm not going to tell your listener that they are going to hell, but I am going to say that there is something here to look at, and that before you cross over, take a look at Christ. Take a look at this difference. Take a look at this love. Take a look at walking. And take a look at the difference of ETs, the difference of species. And I do believe that there is a place that evil will go, and that those of us who want a higher ground, hopefully will go to that higher ground. And many of us who have had near-death experiences or who have crossed over and come back, and those who see those who have passed on with divine visitation, there is a difference. It's different than what we're taught theologically. So that's where I am. I abide in Christ. I live in Christ. I walk in his footsteps to the best that I can. And if he's an ET, he certainly was a different one.
How is your interaction with angels different than with ETs?
That's such a beautiful question. I love talking about that. And I try my best in my book story to show you the drawing of what it was like to see it first as a 1 to 2 year old when I was read that little, when I could see the difference. They are lights of energy that are so beautiful and so loving and have a message for you and to you. Their presence is filled with such glory and beauty and peace because of where they come from. That's the best way. They do have, from what I've seen, they're buff. Many of them are just they're so big and their wings are enormous, the span, like a beautiful picture of a swan covering its ducklings. That's what it's like when you're encased in their wings. It is stunning and beyond belief. They do not require a craft, and their signature is, the energy is different, and their love. In an ET, the presence is more clinical. It's not that they don't have love, they experience things differently. They ask questions. The angels usually come with a message or are there for comfort. The ETs are there for a particular agenda, or they want to show you something or train you for something, or take you somewhere, show you something. The angels can do that too, but it's a lot more clinical in its feel with an ET. They do not have wings from what I've seen. Not even those who are hurting in their pain, whether they're a large praying mantis or of another kind. And I don't see the angels having pain. They fight in a different way. They have a spiritual battle. That's why Paul talks us to put on our spiritual armor. And that requires a deep learning, and I'm still learning on how to do that, to fight, because you're fighting in a different realm. So the ETs require, from what I've seen, a craft, but they get into a certain location and then they can come down. They can beam down, beam up. That stuff about beam me up, Scotty. Yep.
Have the ETs ever given you an urgent message for humanity?
Yeah. I asked once about the grid. I was concerned about the space around our planet. And one, he felt like he was trying to describe this particular one aboard the craft, felt like he was military, male, and hybrid inside. He had a lot of different DNA structure and could shift in and out. And it wasn't scary. He wasn't a shapeshifter that was frightening. He was one that could use his abilities. So I saw a uniform, I saw DNA, the shift between a gray type and then into, it was very unusual. And this is my first time actually using all of the description. And they said, come over here, and they pull up, the hologram is very easy. They can produce it whether there's a table there or without a table. And they pulled up a square, perfectly squared, equal distant square grid pattern above the Earth, above the planet. And he said, now look, what's going up? I said, oh, that's the shuttle. He said, what do you see? I said, well, the fence or the grid is broken. He said, that's what the nuclear does. We don't want you using that in space. In seeing things ahead, I'm but one of many millions of people who have dreams and visions. Countless. And when the dreams come, it's not necessarily from an ET or being aboard a craft. Many do experience being shown the future aboard a craft. Yes, many do. Mine are given directly in my dream state or in a waking vision, or if I'm just meditating, listening to music, seeing the earth. Yes, but I'd rather not go into that because I believe we are currently in the process of creating a good timeline, and that is my hope. And that's why I pray for the planet, just like millions of others. I'm not anything special here. I'm just one of many.
If somebody wants to contact the ETs, how do they do it?
If you've been aboard crafts or you've had contact or you've seen them before, start there. And if you haven't, but you'd like to, then start with everyone, no matter where you are in your contact. We need to physically take the physical body and get quiet. My husband had his sighting with me, his first one. We just sat outside in the quiet. I held his hand. I said, let's say the Lord's Prayer. Let's get quiet first. And then contact began. And then we went from there. We had to physically get the body in a quiet state. You can use music if you like, but cut off all sound. And also make sure that drinking is fine, having a drink is fine, but try not to in a setting when you're trying to have observation or contact, because early on, my own contact was explained to me, if you drink, it disrupts the synopsis, and you're not, the contact telepathically is a little more difficult. So they like you clear. There's nothing wrong with having a drink. That's not what I'm saying. Who doesn't enjoy a good glass of wine or a single Scotch malt? Who doesn't enjoy that? But when you're seeking contact, get the body quiet, get the mind quiet, music, then get everything off, or do a meditation, or have someone say something. You can use Sanskrit or your Lord's Prayer, or say prayers. And then once you're there, let your intuitive skills guide you to where you need to look in the cosmos, north, south, east, or west. Take that as your leading and look there and wait. And then you will either usually see move. And then the next step, is allow that quietness and that meditative state to then let your consciousness reach out and say, I would like to experience a sighting. I would like to experience good, safe, honest, trustworthy, good for mankind contact. Because when you're doing anything, you have to use discernment. Just like when you go to the door, look out before you open the door to let them in, and make sure who's there. So I would probably sit with someone who knows what's good and bad, and then wait to see what kind of contact you're going to have, whether it's an orb or whether it's the camouflage leaves, and you're able, because when they're crossing in front of one another, it breaks the camouflage, that magnetic pole, and you'll be able to see the craft. Or a portal will open and they'll come through, or you'll see them in a distance inside of a constellation. That is one way to do it. Others will go on a trip somewhere to Machu Picchu or to sit on a mountain in Peru. I know friends who do that. Some people go to open spaces out west. Some people go to Sedona. Others, you just use your backyard.
What's the best way to discern whether you have contacted a good or a bad ET?
That's the educational side that the government or the officials or those are going to have to disclose. There are some important things that have to be done to prepare the public or anybody. I'm going to start with knowing what to do with let's approach it from an animal point of view. Let's just from a child, okay? You tell the child not to put their hand on a hot stove. That's a given. You tell a child, don't go too close to the water because this is time of the mating of alligators. Just don't go. And the same thing when you recognize an angry dog. You recognize the dog is angry. Those who know if it's drooling or something, they recognize if it's sick. Also, you can, if you allow your intuitive skills, you'll recognize whether to approach something or not to approach something. That's using your God-given ability. It's already there. You have to use it. And you can either let it expand and grow, or you can prevent it. That's where learning your patterns is good. Just look back over your life. So that's a start. When you're approaching, I'm going to jump to the crafts. If a craft is landed and you've got crash retrieval groups, they know to keep a certain distance. They'll check the radiation amounts and so forth, and the bodies that are there. They'll bring in a sensitive or an intuitive there who can have contact with the ET. That's been going on forever. And there are different books and people who are acquainted with that and know it, and they've told their life story. So that's another educational part of it. There are those right now dealing with the consequences of getting too close and not knowing to approach a craft or working with one, and they have radiation problems, brain problems, all sorts of problems in the body. Some recent podcasts now are out with that. If I can think of the names, I will tell you at the end, but they are out now. They're speaking. The scientist, I'm sorry, I cannot think of his name right now. Excuse me. Maybe I will at the end. He's working with those who have had injuries with their own crafts. So with the ETs, that's the third part. In my experience, when you are addressing a reptilian and you are allowed to be in their presence, because they are extremely formidable, and some of them are not good and beneficial for mankind, and some of them are. And some are hybrids within humanity. It is best with some of the species to maintain about 6 feet. I'm just giving my personal experience. I'm not saying that I know this, that this is the given to do. I'm sharing what I've learned. That's all. So you will also, it's best to keep a distance, just as you would a dog. That's why I was using that as an illustration, or an animal, any kind of animal that's angry. So I'm not saying an ET is an animal. I'm saying just that as an example to use. So when you are in the presence of another being, just as when you're in the presence of another person, you, whether we all realize it or not, we can sometimes sense when someone is good, when someone is emanating love and goodness, versus when someone is anxious or angry or actually evil. We know many times. We don't know how to read it, maybe. There's some people who don't know how to read it, but they're feeling it. So if you haven't developed those skills, just allow yourself, when you feel it, to keep a distance and say, all right, I'm going to stand over here and I'm going to wait. And if you haven't had any training or growing up with telepathy, it's going to be a little unusual. It's going to come in to usually the center area, or right up in here. You're going to feel it between the forehead here down into the solar plex area. And it will come in what I'm going to describe as wavelengths. The grays tend to come in with this very fast. So it's going to come in very, very fast, those thoughts. And that sound or that frequency is going to hit you at a different rate. And each, just like a voice, each voice is different. Some people talk way up here and it gets very annoying. And some people have a beautiful speaking voice down low, and others are kind of in the middle like me. So, or they're going to have a low sound or a high sound or calming. And the ETs have the same with their telepathy. So when it comes in, if you're not trained, it can take you off guard. So all of this, as I'm saying, it just takes a little while to know it before you meet them. So you kind of need to know that before you're in their presence. And if you haven't had any kind of education on that, it can be a little startling. And so they have the ability to hold you in place so that you won't be scared and won't run or won't shoot your gun at them. Or if you're afraid and you're a policeman, you need to learn that don't shoot at every species that gets out of a craft, or don't get too close because it might harm you in some way, particularly if it's leaking. And so I think we just have to kind of get together and present these things to the public in an educational form so that people can be prepared a little bit better. It's the same way if you are in a position, a high political position, but you've never been to you've been put into this position, and now you're going to go to a major state dinner, and it's going to be in another country, and you've never been there. Well, it behooves you to go and sit with the person or who has been to that country or who is from that country and say, what do I wear? What's the best way to greet? In that native tongue, how do I say hello? And my name is, at least learn that. That's respectful. And then proceed from there. And it's the same way with the ETs, I think. Except for those who are, you need to be able to differentiate between those who are not beneficial to mankind. And some of the shapeshifters are not beneficial. Not all, but some of the reptilian groups are not beneficial for mankind. And so therefore, that's going to be really difficult as things become more and more exposed to the public. It's going to be kind of difficult for people to digest, just like all the corruption. It's difficult to digest.
Should we protect ourselves in some way from the bad ETs? And if so, how?
Boy, you've really come up with some great questions. It caused me to think before I can answer. I'll go at it this way and start it from the Christian standpoint of view for anybody who's a Christian who's listening. If we put on the armor of God, helmet of salvation, breastplate of righteousness, loins girded about with truth, feet shod with the gospel of peace, sword of the Spirit, and the shield of faith. Okay. If you face a demonic figure, you're going to face it spiritually. And sometimes if that demonic figure is in form because it has inhabited or is inhabiting a body, you're going to have to protect yourself. So you need to know how to put on the armor. Because if the angels are fighting with their armor in a spiritual location, we better know how to do it in the 3D, but it comes from the spirit first. We have to know in the spirit realm as well. And we put on hats, we put on gloves to protect ourselves from weather. So it's logical that if you do it with the body, you do it with the spirit. That's the first thing. In terms of the ET approach, if you want to protect yourself because you believe that you are being abducted against your will and it's something negative, I have found that you can distract them with LED lights, bright LED lights. You can also put on your Christian music or beautiful music to disrupt the frequency of them even coming into your space.
When you say LED lights, do you mean LED lights?
LED, yes, LED. I'm just giving some practical applications to those who still believe and feel that they are being taken against their will. So remember, I'm approaching it from a demonic is a demonic from another realm. A bad ET is in its own ET state. So I'm differentiating because this has been my experience. It is my personal belief. I'm not saying I have all of it or that I'm totally right, but this is what I've been shown and seen and understand it in terms of how it comes about. So I'm just going to go to this next with the ETs and use your faith and your music. If you practice meditation, use that and surround yourself with your sound and your frequency, your binaural beats. Also, a lot of people who don't have a particular faith but believe they're taken, they use stones and crystals that have energy. Everything has energy. Even that which is listed in the Bible, the stones of the ephod, all of the gemstones that are listed in Revelation, all of the things and the stones and the crystals that are aboard some of the crafts. Everything is used and wonderfully created, beautifully designed all full of energy and light. So if that's what you use it. Start with what you have. But above all, know that the God of this universe created you, loves you, wants you to be at peace and love, and that you have a spiritual right to say, no, you ain't gonna take me. It's not gonna happen. And the Christian says, I come against you in the name of Jesus. If you don't believe in Jesus, start with where you are. Should we protect ourselves? Jesus says in the Gospel of John, if you don't believe in me, at least believe in the works that I do. What did he do? Preach the gospel, heal the sick, raise the dead. He walked through walls, he walked on the water, and so many other things that the word says we can't even write the books about. So, but from the love of the cross, he looked down and said, I forgive you. So, wow, that's a heck of a lot of love. So if we can say spiritually and honestly, you don't have domain over my body, whoever you are in my room, whatever negativity you're sensing, or you don't have that right. You don't have that right. Now you leave me alone, and I've surrounded myself with everything I have, and you can't cross this. I've known a lot of people who use that, no matter what faith or what they have. It's just like you stand up to the bully and you grab the hand of those around you in the sandbox and you say, ain't gonna happen. And you kick them out of the sandbox because you've joined hands with those of faith. So should we protect ourselves? Yes. That's why I think that they had to prep even me. They had to prep me. They had to prepare me and take me up, even in the best of clothing, even what was there. I get cold, so they put me in linen. Linen helps. That was very kind to dress me in linen.
Stanton Freeman is unfortunately no longer with us. But can you share a little bit about your and your mother's relationship with him?
Oh, yeah. Well, of course, Kathleen Martin has a lot more to say. She has all the beautiful stories in the world to share about her experiences, her life, her writing. Mine started in 1995 when I reached out to Stanton Friedman because I found him in the book by John Story, in the encyclopedia book. And I looked him up and found him, and we had conversations on the phone. We also had emails, and he took the 1992 story, and he even said, Rebecca, whatever conversation you had aboard that craft, even if it was discussion about God, whatever it was, he said, you can send it. A lot of scientists believe in God. Don't be afraid to include it in your report. Now, those were his words. And he was always open. And when Mother had her sighting, he was the person that I called. He took the phone call and talked to my mom. I saw him. I went to see him in Titusville, took a friend of mine and listened to him speak there. And that was my first official time actually seeing him and meeting him, shaking his hand, giving him a hug, and seeing him face to face near the Cape. And when he spoke there. And then over the years, in 2016, there was I think it was 16, I had written a song for MUFON called The Universe is Calling You, which was adopted by Mark D'Antonio, the astronomer. And your listeners can go to that. It's called The Universe is Calling You. And it was played at that particular, I think it was in Orlando, and he was with Kathy Martin at that time. And I do have a picture of us together. And that was the last time I actually officially saw him in person. And I found him to be an open, available person, a man of his word to me and to my mother, and what it meant. And that what he said to her stuck in my mind. He says, the military, the government are not going to bring about the disclosure you want, as he said to her. He said, you're not crazy. And as you've always known, everything is real. It's all there. It's up to us. We We are the disclosure. All the people that's been going on for millennium, all the things in the past, on the hieroglyphs, in the books, in the paintings from the 15th century, in the mosaics, everything's there in all of the things found in archaeology. It's all there. They've been on this planet forever. But he knows that. And his legacy is, and his gift and his availability to people, it touched a lot of us. And Kathy was a big part of that and knows that even more than myself.
So do you believe that the government will never disclose the ETs?
I believe they're doing it now. They're doing it now. In the last couple of years, it's been one succession, not only just the hearings and what they've been doing since 2016, 17, it's just, it's following up. It's going in line. It's a drizzle. I know it is. And the movies are doing it too. But they are disclosing it in a faster rate than before. People are coming forth and speaking faster than before. They're being allowed to speak faster than before. And many of us, like myself, with my little story, are coming out and reaching and stepping forward so we can do our part. So yes, they are doing it. And many of the people in Washington and all of the groups, all of the institutes and organizations, there are many of them. I could list them all now, but they're all out there. Paradigm, Opus, MUFON is still in existence. IUFOB, the Bureau is taking off with Terry Lee King and Mindy, Totfest. There's so many. I think I said Opus and UFORC hopes to come back. They're all doing their part.
Well, do you ever think President Trump will officially announce that the ETs are real?
It is my hope that he will, based on his background and his wanting to move the technology forward. And with Elon there, it is my hope that they will. And based on the fact that I believe it was his uncle who got was connected with Tesla. That's the person, my husband. If he could go back in time, he'd like to be his assistant. He's got such an inventor's mind. So my hope is yes. And do I believe it? I'm resting in the hope that he will allow it and that he will stand with the ETs and help bring about disclosure, and that we all will find it from the local level ready to go and disperse the information properly to the public without fear. And this is what concerns me, that the hearings are lacking in that they do not have people there. I'm not saying me to be there, but greater experiencers who are more famous, and they're out there. They've been out there. They should be sitting with those who are bringing disclosure, answering other questions, because when you just have someone who's giving out something and is saying everything is a national security and everything has to be told in a skiff, I understand, I do. But when you don't have an experiencer there and you don't have other data and observations there, and you're not feeding the public and telling them where they can go to file a report, you've just had a congressional hearing that's empty and is leaving the public in fear and anger. And why? Why? Educate while you have the opportunity.
If people want to find out more about your Christian music, should they go to Spotify or YouTube?
I'm working on that right now to get it onto Spotify, but it is currently, I have it in a small CD, which is called Hope. I also am on YouTube, but you have to go to Rebecca Renfroe and type in "The Universe is Calling You." You have to go YouTube, Rebecca Renfroe, "Will You Speak His Name?" For a country song. You have to go YouTube, Rebecca Renfroe, My Country Shines Through. So I'm working to get someone who can pull all of the music I've dispersed on YouTube into one setting, into one place. And, or they could go to my Facebook page. I do have some up there, which is the artist page that they give you, so you can put things up. That's where they can go for the music.
Your book is called Quantum Windows and Dimensions, A Christian Woman's Journey of Faith and ET Contact. If people want to find out more about it, should they go to Amazon or a website?
Amazon. And just type in quantum windows and it will usually come up right there, right away.
After watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions. Are you open to that? And if so, how do they contact you?
There is at the back of the book, we put in, my husband devised a special place where people could go so we wouldn't overtax my regular email account. He's trying to put it back up because it seems to erase off of my computer for whatever reason. So your listeners can go to, and he's going to continue to try to put it back up, ren.qw777@gmail.com. ren.qw777@gmail.com. And that way, anyone who has a question, I can answer just that from the podcast view instead of keeping it on my regular email.
Before we wrap it up, can you leave us with a last positive message?
And I wrote it out so I wouldn't have to go find it in the book. We are above everything in this life. We are spiritual beings. Whether you believe you're going someplace afterwards or not, it is a truth that I believe exists, an eternal basic truth. We are spiritual beings. How and what happens and everything, I don't know all of it, only some of it. But I believe, and I write this in my book, I believe the essence of what lies beneath the solid matrix of us as created beings is the spiritual, ethereal, eternal part of us vibrating like the entire universe, like a beating heart. And the criteria of what we want to all ask ourselves is, have our experiences been fruitful? Has it produced anything? Did it change my life, having these contacts and all of seeing the differences and everything all the way through? And yes, I believe I've gained in love and joy, peace, gentleness. I believe all that's listed in those gifts, in that, I believe I've gained in that fruit by my experiences. Paranormal, the spiritual, the ET, yes. Has it made me a better person? I think so.
Rebecca, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Oh, I've really enjoyed it. You put some challenging things out for me.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.